The day Elias Crow sold his land, the sky hung low and colorless, like it too had come to watch a man surrender his life. He stood at the edge of his ranch, what little remained of it, boots sunk into frozen dirt, eyes fixed on the rolling plains that once belonged to his family. 40 years of sunrises had broken over this land. 40 years of sweat, blisters, broken fences, and quiet prayers whispered into the wind. Now it was leaving him, acre by acre, dollar by dollar, until only one final transaction remained. A coffin. The undertaker's wagon waited behind him on the road, its wheels creaking softly in the cold. The black box inside was plain pine, no carving, no brass handles. Elias hadn't asked for decoration. Decoration was for men who had something left to be remembered by. He turned his hat slowly in his hands, fingers tracing the frayed brim. The wind tugged at his coat, carrying the smell of dust and old grass. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. "Mr. Crow," the banker said gently, as if speaking louder might shatter him. "Once you sign, it's done." Elias nodded. His voice, when it came, sounded older than he felt. "I know." The paper shook as he signed his name. With that, the Crow Ranch 3 generations strong belonged to someone else. Also, he could afford a coffin. Because in the small frontier town of Red Hollow, dying without one was considered a shame worse than death itself. Elias climbed into the undertaker's wagon without another word. As the horses lurched forward, he did not look back. Some goodbyes, he had learned, were too heavy to survive a second glance. Red Hollow appeared just before dusk, its buildings hunched together against the wind like tired old men. Lanterns flickered to life along the main street, their glow spilling onto muddy ground. The saloon hummed low with distant voices, but the church bell was silent. It had been silent for 6 days. 6 days since Mary Crow was buried. Elias stepped down from the wagon, his knees stiff, his chest hollow. Townsfolk paused when they saw the coffin being unloaded. Hats were removed, eyes dropped. No one spoke, everyone knew. Mary had been his wife for 23 years. She had died quietly, fever taking her in the night, her hand still wrapped around his. They had buried her in the cold ground with a borrowed coffin, one promised to be returned. Now that coffin needed to go back. And Elias had nothing left to give but the land beneath his feet. Inside the undertaker's office, the air smelled of pine and oil. The undertaker, Mr. Holloway, cleared his throat. "You want to inspect it?" he asked. Elias shook his head. "It's fine," Holloway hesitated. "Custom says we open it before final delivery." Elias looked up, eyes sharp for the first time that day. "There's no need." A pause stretched between them, thick and uneasy. Finally, Holloway nodded. "As you wish." The coffin was loaded onto Elias's wagon, the last thing he would ever own. He climbed onto the seat, reins heavy in his hands, and turned toward the edge of town where the small Crow family plot waited under pale moonlight. The ride was silent. Too silent. When he reached the burial ground, Elias climbed down and stood staring at the coffin. The moon revealed every knot in the pine wood, every imperfection. "This is it," he murmured. "End of the road." He climbed onto the seat, reins heavy in his hands, and turned toward the edge of town where the small Crow family plot waited under pale moonlight. The ride was silent. Too silent. When he reached the burial ground, Elias climbed down and stood staring at the coffin. The moon revealed every knot in the pine wood, every imperfection. "This is it," he murmured. "End of the road." Not dead. Alive. The stranger's face was pale. Alive. The stranger's face was pale, lips cracked, eyes fluttering weakly open as a shallow breath escaped his chest. Elias fell to his knees, shock robbing him of sound. The man whispered, barely audible, "Please. Don't let them take me back." Elias's mind reeled. Coffins didn't breathe. Dead men didn't beg. Weakly open as a shallow breath escaped his chest. Elias fell to his knees, shock robbing him of sound. The man whispered, barely audible, "Please. Don't let them take me back." Elias's mind reeled. Coffins didn't breathe. Dead men didn't beg. "Who are you?" Elias asked, voice trembling. As the riders closed in, Elias Crow made a choice that would change what little life he had left. He grabbed his rifle, stepped into the moonlight. And stood between the coffin and the coming storm. Because whatever sin had put that man inside a coffin, it was about to knock on Elias Crow's door. The riders did not charge. That was what frightened Elias Crow most. 5 horses stood still at the edge of the burial ground, breath rising like ghosts in the cold. The men atop them watched in silence, their patience sharper than any gun. One rider eased forward, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, pale as old bone in the moonlight. "Well now," the man said calmly, "seems we found ourselves a misunderstanding." Elias stood in front of the coffin, rifle held across his chest. His hands shook, but he did not lower the barrel. "This ground's spoken for," he said. "Go on." The scarred man's eyes slid to the coffin behind Elias. "That box don't belong to you." Elias swallowed. The wind tugged at his coat, whispering Mary's name through the grass. He thought of the land he'd sold that morning. Thought of the promise he'd broken to his father to keep the ranch whole. "There's nothing in it worth dying over," the man continued, voice almost kind. A faint sound came from the coffin, a breath. The scarred man smiled slowly. "Hear that?" The other riders shifted. Hands drifted closer to holsters. Elias tightened his grip on the rifle. "I buried my wife 6 days ago," he said. "I won't help you bury another soul." For a long moment, no one moved. Then the scarred man raised a hand. "Mount up," he said. "We'll come back when the old man's courage runs out." The riders turned their horses and vanished into the dark, leaving only churned dirt and a promise that felt heavier than threat. Elias did not breathe until the night was empty again. He knelt beside the coffin and opened it. The man inside was pale, sweat-soaked, eyes open and burning with life. Elias helped him sit up, wrapping his coat around his shoulders. "You alive?" Elias whispered. The man nodded faintly, barely. "What did you do to earn that?" Elias asked. The man closed his eyes. "Refused to lie." That was all he said. Elias lifted him into the wagon and turned toward the ranch, no longer his by law, but still his by memory. Every fence post along the way felt like an accusation. Inside the house, time had stopped. Mary's teacup still sat by the window. Her shawl hung by the door. Elias laid the stranger on the bed they had shared for 23 years. The man flinched at the touch of clean water, teeth clenched against pain. "My name's Jonah," he said at last. Elias nodded. "That's enough for now." Jonah looked at him surprised. "You don't want the rest?" "I'll hear it when you're strong enough to survive telling it," Elias said. Silence settled between them, broken only by the creak of the house. Elias sat at the table, head in his hands. He had sold his land for a coffin. Now that coffin had brought him a choice heavier than poverty. A knock came at the door. Elias reached for his rifle. "Elias," a woman's voice called softly. "It's Clara." He opened the door to Clara Bennett, the schoolteacher. Her eyes swept past him, sharp and observant. She saw Jonah. She understood immediately. "You found him," she said quietly. Jonah stirred. "Then I'm already late." Clara stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "The riders work for Whitaker," she said to Elias. "Railroad money. Bought the sheriff. Bought silence." Elias looked at Jonah. "You the silence they're paying for?" Jonah nodded once. "I was supposed to sign papers saying landowners sold willingly. They didn't." Clara's voice dropped. "If he speaks, men go free who shouldn't. If he doesn't, this town stays owned." Elias stared at the floor. Mary's voice echoed in his memory. "Do the right thing, even when it costs you." "What's the cost this time?" he asked. "Everything," Clara said. Night deepened. Jonah's fever worsened. Elias held a damp cloth to his forehead, watching a man fight to stay alive inside a house already full of ghosts. "They buried me alive," Jonah murmured. "Thought no one would notice." Elias felt something break open in his chest. "I noticed." Outside, a lantern flickered far down the road. Clara stiffened. "They're watching." Elias looked at Jonah, then at the rifle on the wall. He had already lost his land. He would not lose his soul with it. "We leave tonight," he said. Jonah tried to protest, but strength failed him. Elias lifted him gently, laying him in the wagon beneath hay and canvas. Clara took the reins beside Elias, rifle across her lap. They rode without lamps, moon hidden behind clouds. The ranch disappeared behind them, like a dream ending too soon. Halfway through the canyon, a shape stepped into the road. The scarred man raised a lantern, its light cutting through the dark. "Told you we'd be patient," he said. Hands reached for guns. Elias felt Jonah stir behind him. A shot rang out. The horses screamed. The wagon lurched as bullets tore through canvas. Clara fired once, clean and sure. Elias fired again, pain exploding in his shoulder as a bullet grazed him. They broke through the canyon mouth, fleeing into darkness. Behind them, the scarred man's voice carried cold and certain. "You can't outrun what's already dead." Jonah groaned, slipping into silence. Elias held the reins with blood-slick hands, realizing the truth too late. Saving a man's life was only the beginning. Keeping him alive would cost far more. Revealing what the night had taken and what it had left behind. Elias Crow rode with his back bent and his eyes hollow, each mile dragging itself out of him like confession. Dried blood clung to his sleeve. The land around him looked endless, yet for the first time in his life, he felt small inside it. "He's burning up," she said softly. "If he slips again, we may not reach the fort." He had already accepted that the road no longer cared what he wanted. They stopped near a narrow creek where cottonwoods bent low, their leaves whispering like old prayers. Elias lifted Jonah down with hands that trembled despite his strength. He laid him in the shade, dipped a cloth into the cold water, and pressed it to Jonah's brow. His eyes opened, glassy but aware. "You should have left me," he whispered. Elias swallowed hard. "Already did that once," he said. "Cost me everything." They buried me alive, because truth was expensive. Clara knelt beside them. "Then let it be worth the price." Elias stood and looked across the open land, the same land his father had trusted, the same land Mary had loved. "Then they'll have to cross me," he said. "And I ain't moving again." 3 riders. Elias saw them first. His chest tightened, but fear never came, only clarity. He helped Jonah sit against a rock, placed his hat gently over the man's eyes to block the sun. "Whatever happens, you stay breath in." Jonah managed a faint smile. "Funny thing," he whispered. "I think I finally will." The scarred man dismounted. His confidence thinner now, worn down by failure and time. "You're tired, old man," he called. "This ends easy if you let it. I sold my land for a coffin," he said. "Thought that was the end of me." The scarred man's eyes flicked to Jonah, then let the coffin finish its job. "She always said the right choice costs more," he replied. "Guess she was right. No wind, no sound. Only the weight of every choice Elias had ever made." The shot cracked the air. Riders crested the ridge behind them, federal marshals, coats marked with badges that caught the sun like fire. At their front rode a man with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Jonah Hale?" the marshal called. Jonah pushed the hat from his face and lifted his head. "Here," he said. "Still breathing." Elias stood at the back of the courtroom, hat in his hands, listening as Jonah spoke, not loud, not angry, but steady. He spoke of forged deeds, bought silence, and men who buried truth so profit could live longer. Whitaker never looked at him when the verdict came. "You did the right thing," she said. Elias nodded slowly. "Didn't know the world would let me." "You didn't just save my life," he said. "You reminded me why it mattered." Elias shook his head. "You gave mine back." Horses grazed again where silence once lay heavy. Clara brought bread, books, and quiet company. The land remembered him, even when he had doubted himself. He removed his hat and held it to his chest. "I kept my promise," he said softly. The wind moved through the grass like an answer. Others give it away to keep a soul alive, and sometimes that is how a man finally learns what he was meant to own.